The South African Health Products Regulatory Authority has approved the rollout of 2 more coronavirus vaccines. Comirnaty, which is an mRNA vaccine by Pfizer, can now be used locally. It'll be administered in double doses with a 3-week interval for those aged 12 and older. The other is Sinopharm's COVID-19 Sinopharm, which is an inactivated vero cell vaccine, which will also be administered in double doses with a 2 to 4 week interval. However, the Chinese-made shots will only be made available to those 18 years and older. Well, for more on the story, we're joined by the Progressive Health Forum convener, Dr. Aslam Dasu. Dr. Dasu, there have long been calls for the extension, at least, of the list of providers that we have for vaccines in this country. How does the Progressive Health Forum receive today's news?
Good evening, Kathy. Thank you for inviting me. We really welcome this news. We now have a 3rd vaccine in our armory at Sinopharm. Just to say that the Comirnaty vaccine is the Pfizer vaccine that we need, but the approval now is for 12, which was under an emergency procedure, but which is now fully registered for use. As you mentioned, the Sinopharm is prescribed for use in 18 years and older, but it offers us now a wider array of vaccines, and perhaps to be able to get it to more sites where there may have been difficulties in, for example, storing the Pfizer vaccine. So this is all very good news overall.
When we look at part of the narrative in as far as the debates around vaccinations are concerned, there is a view from some quarters of society that they would be perhaps more inclined to take a vaccine that comes from the South versus the West, given whatever reasons behind that. Do you think that this is going to have an impact directly on the amount of vaccinations that we're likely to see?
Yes, I think the fact that we have registered this one will have a positive impact. And I think we need to take a broader view about this. The Sinopharm vaccine has also been approved by the WHO. It's one of the approved vaccines around the world. Indeed, hundreds of millions of doses of it have been given. I've heard the concern expressed by some that it was found to have a poor antibody response to the Omicron variant. But that's just the nature of these variants and the vaccine immune responses to them. So, for example, you may recall that the AstraZeneca vaccine at the beginning of last year was found to have much less efficaciousness against the beta variant that emerged then, but was then found to have shot the lights out against the Delta variant later. The important thing to understand is that with all of these vaccines, it's the major part of your immune system, which is known as your T-cell immunity, is what is activated. And none of the variants have been able to evade that. And that level of immunity is what prevents an infected person from progressing to severe disease, hospitalization, or death. And so the fundamental premise around the mass vaccination is to ensure that, particularly for vulnerable groups, that everyone get vaccinated in order to prevent that from occurring. They're not all equally efficacious in terms of antibody responses, but the Omicron variant even produced much less efficaciousness in the Pfizer vaccine and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine at 2 doses and 1 dose respectively, and that is why boosters have had to be given. But a new variant may emerge, that will change these proportions around, and the Sinopharm vaccine may well be more efficacious then. The most important thing is that they all prevent progression to severe disease.
Dr. Dasu, given the fact that COVID-19 is pretty much with us indefinitely at this stage, Are we likely to see the continuing development of various vaccines? I mean, to the point where we are with flu shots now, that you will have different pharmaceutical companies offering an array of options for COVID-19 vaccines as we do with flu shots?
Yes, I think that is very likely. Look, I think we have entered, and expert opinion is converging on this view, globally and locally, that we have entered the new phase of the pandemic, and the step change that Omicron represents, may portend that all future variants will be of similar nature or milder. The important thing is that, as you said, COVID's going nowhere. It's going to be among us. It will circulate, and it will flare up every now and then. As you have with the flu shot, annually you take a flu shot because the flu virus also changes almost on that seasonal basis. We may enter such a situation with COVID as well, and yes, you may need to have to take a shot every year or every 2 years, depending on how this thing settles down over the next year. But during 2022, I think we can accept that this year is the year we pivot away from the emergency phase of the pandemic and move toward a more endemic phase, allowing us all to, live more normal lives. And I think, as you can see with the regulations changing around schools and so on, that has been, pretty much the understanding also of the government. But, they need to do a lot more to lift all the remaining restrictions so that we can continue life as normally as possible. We must accept, however, that we will have to maintain some care with regard to transmission, and we should therefore have to wear masks in public spaces and avoid poorly ventilated venues, where there's a lot of people. And I think those common sense approaches are things that people can comfortably manage. We are now 2 years into this particular emergency phase of the pandemic, and I think there's a great deal of fatigue, and I think the step change that Omicron suggests is a welcome development in the course of the pandemic.
Convener of the Progressive Health Forum, Dr. Aslam Dasu. Let's leave it there for tonight.